Hi, my name is Abbie Cohen, and I'm a PhD candidate at UCLA School of Education and Information Studies in the Urban Schooling Department. I'd like to just begin my talk by thanking the AAUW for this dissertation fellowship that I was awarded this year. I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of this community and to be supported to complete my dissertation this year and work towards sharing it with the broader world. Today, I'm going to be giving a talk or brief talk about my dissertation, which is entitled After the Final Bell, a critical ethnography of a youth-serving community-based education nonprofit. So before getting into my research questions, I just want to situate the work in context. So for the last 50 years, we've been living in an era of privatization of our public goods, which has occurred alongside the hollowing out of our public welfare system. We often call this federal retrenchment. This includes an underfunding of our public schools. As a result, youth-serving community-based nonprofits have tried to step in to fill this void to support public school students in academic, in social emotional, and in cultural ways. However, many of these nonprofits have turned away from the scarce and difficult to access public resources and public dollars, and have come to rely on the charity and private wealth of philanthropists to fund their programming and their operations. My research critically examines the intersection of education nonprofits, philanthropy, and public schools, exploring the implications of this new cutting-edge reform in public education, but importantly through an intersectional lens, meaning I pay close attention to the way power, as visible through race, class, and gender, influence and guide the operations of one youth-serving community-based nonprofit organization. My guiding research questions for my dissertation were, how do youth-serving community-based nonprofits manage the tension between private philanthropy and the needs of their students? And how do different organizational stakeholders define success? So I answered my research questions by partnering with a youth-serving community-based education nonprofit. And I conducted a critical ethnography, which included 70 interviews and focus groups, interviewing staff, students, donors, board members, community members, etc. I attended 40 participant observations or events, which included staff meetings, program sessions, and donor and fundraiser events. And I analyzed 10 documents, including external-facing documents like marketing email blasts or listserv emails, and internal-facing documents like strategic documents and budgets of the organization. So the organization that I centered my research with and on was an organization called PAMO. PAMO is a pseudonym, and that organization was given this name by the executive director who I worked really closely with. Her name is Lotus Brown. PAMO is a nonprofit that supported nearly 600 elementary-age girls, grades 3rd through 5th, annually through multi-generational mentorship. The girls, who are public school students, are mentored by college-age young women in a city in the Northeast of the United States. Those college-age women are then mentored by adult professional women in the community. So it's this multi-generational mentorship approach. The organization aims to empower historically marginalized girls to be and create the change they want to see in the world. And importantly, for my research, PAMO relies on private philanthropy to function. While I'm also not going to spend a ton of time in this little brief amount I have on my research approach, I want to take a moment here to illuminate the participatory and community engaged methods I took for my dissertation, which means that I worked alongside PAMO for the last 3 years. I didn't parachute in. In fact, I actually asked the questions that they were asking about their own practices and structures in which the organization was embedded. So my hope is that my research is a response to their lived experiences and the questions and wonderings that they were having as programmatic staff. So what did I find? Each of my findings illuminates the tension that responds to my research questions and make up a chapter of my dissertation. So success is the first one I'll focus on. Success is how the organization assesses itself versus how donors gauge the impact of the organization. I illuminate an educational trend of the last 30 years that focuses on individual quantifiable metrics, which has become incredibly commonplace in public schools and public education. And now I'm arguing has infiltrated youth-serving community-based nonprofit programming as well, even though these nonprofits were attempted to be designed differently than public schools. I demonstrate, though, how private backers desire quantifiable metrics to show that their dollars are being used for, quote, impact. Building from my conceptual framework of racial capitalism, this is often displayed through a very Eurocentric individual superiority that mimics the playbook that first emerged in public schools at the turn of the century. It de-emphasizes the collective and relationship building efforts that the female staff and mentors emphasized to me as their outcome of success, and rather places the impact and the successful measurements to a particular number or how a certain girl is doing. Following, I illuminate a tension of growth. PAMO sees itself as hyperlocal and meeting the needs of the girls in their program through a multi-generational and multiracial community. However, the donors that support the programming want PAMO to grow for scale and for visibility. And this pressure to grow versus the nonprofit's desire to stay local embodies a theoretical contribution of my work, which I'm describing as the vision bind. The vision bind helps illuminate the tensions that are apparent through the racialized structures and systems in which the nonprofit is embedded. And it leads to tactics that may be divergent from their original mission in order to stay solvent. Lastly, my final finding I present here in my dissertation is the tension of spectacle, which is how the appearances, imagery, and volunteerism overrides the goals of PAMO. The spectacle is a two-way performance, interestingly. The nonprofit performs for donor dollars, but I also show how the donors perform for the nonprofit, particularly through their acts of volunteerism. I build on Guy Debord's theory of society of spectacle to include a race, class, and gendered lens to illustrate how the wealthy, affluent actors present themselves as the heroes of their own story. And I illuminate how the girls in the program become tools to win marketing campaigns and to capture funders' fleeting attention. Importantly, while each chapter can be seen as its own finding, the through line for this project, and as I move forward towards a book project, is the idea that all of these tensions are a result of an interconnected consequence of a neoliberal racial capitalist society that PAMO operates within. In this way, racial stratification, power hierarchies, class inequities, and gendered roles and responsibilities are perpetuated within PAMO, even as PAMO works to disrupt those very same issues. Taken together, my dissertation nuances and complicates an overlooked and understudied role of the youth-serving community-based education nonprofits that dot our public education landscape. While the organizations emerged to support public school students, their dependency on private philanthropy has placed organizations like PAMO in a programmatic cul-de-sac, driving in circles unable to affect the structural change they were designed to attempt to address. The relationship, importantly, between these nonprofits and philanthropy are racialized, they're classist, and they're gendered, as an almost universally white donor class orchestrates the decisions of a nonprofit that is run by a Black woman and serves girls of color. This is even more shocking as the number of foundation dollars going to women and girls organizations still barely reaches 2% of total charitable giving, and only 0.5% of those foundation dollars target women and girls of color. And yet, nonprofits are growing in demand and in size. That said, to truly meet the needs of our young girls and women, we can't just rely on the private philanthropic nonprofit relationship. We must reimagine the public education sector to be more fully robust in order to provide a student-centered, democratic, and rooted in collective thriving approach to a quality public education, and not just on the generosity of a few. So in order to do that, we must listen and act with those on the ground, which speaks to some of my research approaches in participatory action, and also center scholarship in action that pushes against dominant relationships like the one I presented on today. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Ifsha Zehra, and I am a third-year PhD student in the Department of Communication at University of California, San Diego, and I'm also doing a specialization in critical gender studies. Before I begin my presentation, I wanted to thank AAUW, its donors and members who promote critical research work by women. It is also one of the few fellowships for international students, and it allows us invaluable support, security, and encouragement for us to do our work. My research project is titled Gendering Occupied Visions and Centering Imaginations, and it is focused on the domain of overlooked facets of everyday life among the intersection of visual cultures, gender, and photographic archives in the region of Jammu and Kashmir. I am interested in the everyday experiences of women living in Kashmir, a population that has endured political violence for more than 3 decades and persistently navigates challenging living conditions. Studies and research work on Kashmir have predominantly focused on examining state governance, political discourse in the region. While this is important work, it has often left out the quotidian, intimate, and everyday dimensions of life making and everyday lived experiences of the people in the region. Presently, the pre-existing visual modes such as photojournalism, civil society work, and archival institutions in the region have become less viable sites of inquiry. The shutdown of independent media and the changing visual economy of the region has contributed to a visual stagnancy in the region. In my research, I seek to examine other emergent modes of visualization of gendered life that may be creative and subtly subversive. And to do that, I intend to focus on non-spectacular images from everyday life, such as family photographs, everyday photography, and personal visual artifacts, such as photo albums, printed photos, photo frames, negatives of film roll, etc., from Kashmir as a case study of the resistant visual landscape that evades the hyper-visible narratives in the region. A pivotal undertaking of my project will be to critically contemplate the gendered visual dimensions in the region. These creative and critical visual interventions on an intimate and domestic level will allow me not only to see photographs as artifacts, but possibly as access points into institutions of power that can perhaps affect cultural transformations. This kind of work, I hope, can offer a potent counterpoint and assertion of life force as a response to erasure. The personal is political has been the access point for feminist scholarship for many years. In this light, I bring together gendered assertions of personal into the politics of visuals and vice versa. So broadly, I situate my research in the fields of visual cultures, gender studies, and archival studies. Within these three frameworks, my research poses the following questions. What is the potential of civil and cultural practices of everyday visual documentation through photography in quotidian and intimate contexts? How do images of women taken in an intimate setting against the backdrop of political violence enhance our understanding of history, politics, gender, and culture? How might digital technologies be used creatively to bring out material as well as intangible ways in which Kashmiris, particularly Kashmiri women, live amidst conflict? So, in my research, these are some of the key proposed interventions. I offer a proposition to turn toward the personal so that one can think about collectively analyzing individual and disaggregate experiences and memories. The project challenges the dominance of organized and state documentation, but by organizing quotidian and intimate photographic artifacts in an archive. It centers on radical life making, visual politics, gender misrepresentation, and memory work by building on the scholarship of decolonial visual studies scholars, women of color, and indigenous people. In my work, I will examine the discursive emergence of photography practices in the late 20th century and onward. I will study the tensions between hypervisibility and invisibility and everyday images as sites of opposition to the state's cis masculine visual framing and as potential counter archives. I aim to work with grassroots artists, and local individuals to cultivate and steward an archival project that shifts the discursive gaze towards life, life words, and life making of women in the region. So the three broad interventions in this project is first examining the violent discursive erasure in narratives owing to the misrepresentation of marginalized people in the world's most militarized region, that is Kashmir. Secondly, the project brings a decolonialist feminist intervention in the field of visual cultures where Kashmir is studied. And thirdly, I bring forth the decolonial feminist lens to an overwhelmingly masculine discourse of Kashmiri visual cultures. So these are some of the methods that I'm hoping to do or utilize in my research work. My project aims to situate itself within the realm of decolonial visual studies and feminist praxis to develop culturally attuned methodologies to examine and gather visual materials from everyday lives of Kashmiris to enhance our understanding of politics, visuality, gender, and archives. I will employ a varied set of methods that range from archival research to participatory interventions, ethnographic fieldwork, digital ethnography, oral history interviews, multimodal creative production, and I will work toward building knowledge that about the affective relationship of my participants with their chosen artifacts, their experiences and motivations for documentation. I will conduct photo documentation and photo archival workshops and focus group sessions. Field observations and participant observation will form a major portion of the data in my research. I will be using audio-video recordings during my fieldwork with my participants, and photographs will be gathered as data during my research. With these materials, I hope to generate a research project and an archive using non-spectacular, intimate, and everyday photos, as well as interviews of Kashmiri women. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, good morning. My name is Samjhana Khanal, and I'm a PhD candidate at University of California. And I'm very thankful to American Association of University Women, which has been empowering women since 1881. And thank you very much for selecting me and providing me this valuable opportunity to present my research. And I'm very thankful for AAUW, which has been directly supporting for my education, so that I'm very happy and I'm getting good marks and I'm 100% focusing to my study. Thank you, AAW, for all this opportunity and selecting me as AAUW International Fellow 2024. Today, I'm talking about how to solve a real world challenge in agriculture. Indeed, I'm talking about latest downy mildew disease, which has been causing a devastating latest downy mildew, which is oomycetes disease, which is similar to fungal disease, but not exactly fungal. And today I will be talking about how this disease could be overcome by using genetics and molecular biology so that we could get rid of this deadly disease in our favorite vegetable called lettuce. So my research is based on reducing the use of the pesticide in green leafy vegetables, and this idea could be utilized in all other sorts of vegetables and fruits and agriculture. And my research is highly focused on identifying the resistant genes and functionally validating using molecular assay and gene editing tool. So this approach is directly related of using molecular biology and genetics so that farmers should not rely on pesticide that has been deteriorating our nature, human life, wildlife, and everything that exists in the nature and in this universe. Therefore, my research is focusing on utilizing genetics idea so that we could treat our all sorts of disease of vegetables, fruits, and agriculture by finding the genes and curing into the molecular level. Before entering into other slides, let's talk about why there is a need of research and why lettuce matters. So lettuce is one of the most consumed green leafy vegetables in the world. If we talk about California, California is also known as the salad bowl of the world because more than 75% of the green leafy vegetables and lettuce are grown in California, especially in Salinas Valley and some parts of the Arizona as well. Therefore, Arizona and California, which are very near to each other state, and they have been contributing to 99.9% of lettuce production in United States. Therefore, lettuce has a business of around 5 billion annual income and supporting the farmers from this lettuce industry. Therefore, field of lettuce and all these curing the disease genetically is very important in United States and all over the world. So today I will be talking about the latest downy mildew disease. Let's talk about what is this latest downy mildew disease, because some of you might be new for this disease, and this disease is caused by deadly oomycetes, which is causing the spores. If you see on the right picture, you could see this is the lettuce leaf which is suffered from the disease, which is known as the latest downy mildew disease, and this is caused by oomycetes, but they form the white spores. If you see the leaves, all the leaves of the lettuce, they are damaged because of this deadly pathogen. Therefore, this disease, LDM in short form, is very devastating disease in lettuce, and I am focusing on that disease, specific disease. Let's talk about why there is need for my research. As I already mentioned that use of the pesticide has been causing cancer, has been causing the problem, and most specifically, use of the fungicide applications are accompanied by additional expenses, which is more than 3 billion each year in disease management. Therefore, breeding companies all over the world, they have been continuously working hard for breeding the healthy lettuce so that we could use both genomic and biotechnical tools, which is a sustainable approach to find out the candidate resistant genes, and then we can utilize that genes to grow the more further lettuce. After using those genes, all the lettuce, they are grown, they are free from the deadly lettuce downy mildew because they have the resistant genes, so that there will be no need of pesticide or fungicide, which will be very environmental friendly and nature friendly. Therefore, there is a need of use of resistant germplasm, which is also the sustainable approach. There is a history of the lettuce domestication because if we go to the history, lettuce was used in more than before 2500 BC, and lettuce was utilized as an oilseed cultivation in the ancient Egypt. However, after so long of the breeding approaches, scientists has found out the origin of domestication, which is near Azerbaijan in the Middle East and Europe region. Therefore, in my research, I have used the original germplasm, which is near the Caucasus region. I have my research, I have brought the original germplasm from Azerbaijan, which is also the origin of domestication of lettuce. And it is, scientist has predicted that the use of the original germplasm near the domestication could have more resistant genes so that we could also breed for more healthy lettuce that is very resistant against lettuce downy mildew disease. therefore, also my research is very special because I have utilized the germplasm from the origin of domestication place, which is Azerbaijan. So if you see this picture, it is very interesting. Whenever you are also on your way, sometimes at the outside, we could see this type of the weed, right? This is the primitive lettuce was like this condition. If you see, they have the prickle here. So earlier in 2500 BC and more than centuries ago, before scientists worked hard to generate these types of the lettuce, if you could see in the right side pictures, you could see these types of the cultivated lettuce. Now we also used in the salads, but these lettuce were previously in this condition. Scientists like me, me and my colleague who are working in hard lab, they have utilized the gene, and they have done so many biotechnical and plant breeding approaches to make the breeding. Previous lettuce was in this condition, primitive condition, which were not good for consumption. If you could also see some prickles here, but after doing hard work, scientists were able to make the lettuce in this condition. So in my research, I have used one of the father germplasm line, which is also the donor for the resistant gene that was brought from the Azerbaijan, and this wild looks like this. And what I did in my M1 for my PhD project is we brought the germplasm from the Azerbaijan, which is also the origin of domestication, and we breed of the original lettuce looks like this, and this is also known as the father here. And we breed with the current cultivar of the lettuce, which is very consumable, and that also you also found in the supermarket. However, these lettuce that is found currently in the supermarket, they don't have the resistant genes against lettuce downy mildew. So we worked hard on the field and the lab to cross them and produce. After crossing this father, which is the wild lettuce that I show in the previous picture also, if you could see here, it has the prickles, and it is crossbreed with this domesticated one, and we produce the siblings of that one. And after doing the more back crossing method, after doing the more breeding approaches by using the genomic tools, I used my BC4-1, which is also known as the in scientific term fourth backcross 1 population. If you see, this is the picture of our greenhouse in the lab, and we have utilized the backcross fourth S1 generation. In my first aim, I utilized the breeding approaches to get the starting materials. And after getting that in my first year, I also did the inoculation test to know which of these have the resistant genes. So after using the pathogen that are available in the California region and Arizona, I also did the phenotyping. And if you see the experiment result from my M1, you could see that some of them, these are not having the spores, and these were calculated or categorized as 100% resistance plant, and these were having some spores. They are segregating, and these are happily suffering from spores, and these are suffering from lettuce downy mildew. So I used specifically this left side, and we also extracted the DNA and also did the molecular assay and bioinformatics tool and find out the result. And in my M2, I did some lab approaches after finding the candidate gene. So after finding the resistance plants, I extracted DNA, and then I did some bioinformatics stuff in my M2. So my aim was to find out which sibling of the plant from the cross between that wild and the cultivated has the resistant gene. So in my M2, I also found out the candidate resistant genes, which was found in the chromosome 4. And after doing this, I'm in the process of finding the exact position of the genes. And after 2 or 3 months, I will be able to find out the exact candidate resistant genes. That genes are resistant against lettuce downy mildew. And after that, I will also utilize molecular and biotechnology tools by using the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing tools and cloning and molecular assay. And for that, I will be using agrobacterium mediated transformation and different types of the bacteria strains. And I will be functionally validating if these resistance lines are truly contributing for the resistance against lettuce downy mildew or not. And I will be starting my M3 after 2-3 months. And currently, I'm working on extracting the positions, extracting the exact positions of the candidate-resistant genes. And these are the information on germplasm resources. So I have utilized, there are many germplasm resources in the world regarding lettuce. We have in United States, we have in Netherlands and many places and company as well, and also France. But my germplasm was from origin of domestication, which is really important for my research to find out the candidate-resistant genes. And therefore, my research seems very interesting. So my timeline is I started my PhD in 2022 September, and now I have already passed my qualify exam. Now I am a PhD candidate, and I aim to functionally validate those candidate resistance genes that I will be extracting their positions within this 1 or 2 months. And I aim to complete my PhD in 2026. And I would like to contribute for more farmers, because my aim is to reduce the use of the pesticide and fungicide, which are really working bad for the nature, human health, and causing different types of the cancer, respiratory problem, fertility, infertility problems to people. And all these problems could be shot out, could be reduced by using the molecular biotechnology and genetics tools. Therefore, I'm specifically working on molecular biology and genetics. And I really want to make lettuce happy, because I want to cure lettuce downy mildew disease, not by using pesticide, not by using fungicide, but by using genetics and molecular approaches. Therefore, I'm working to treat those lettuce against deadly lettuce downy mildew disease. Thank you very much. I will be happy. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer your questions. And last but not the least, I'm very thankful to all the team of the American Association of University Women for thanking me and providing me this golden opportunity. And I'm very thankful to my lab, professors, and University of California. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bright Futures for Youth has roots in our community for nearly 30 years, and we are expanding our programs on a daily basis to meet the needs of youth. We are here to help change lives in our community. Bright Futures for Youth has 3 core programs: the Friendship Club for girls in 6th through 12th grade, Neo Youth Center for youth and young adults aged 11 to 30, and SAFE, a program for young people experiencing housing instability. Several hundred young people access Bright Futures for Youth programs every month, from attending our after-school programs to getting help from the Safe Drop-In Center. A majority are through the Neo Youth Center, a 3,700 square foot space that opened last fall. The Youth Center includes a cafe with free and healthy food, art and music rooms, a gaming area, a small stage, and a backyard with a patio. A sport court will join the backyard soon.
It's a great place to socialize, and it's also not too far from my school, like a 5-minute walk. Enjoying yourself, enjoying socializing, enjoying adventuring, that kind of thing.
I like to hang out with the people I know here, and I like to play video games. I haven't gone in the art room a lot, but I do like to go in there from time to time and draw and talk to people. And Johnny will teach me like different instruments, and I think that's very cool, and I enjoy it.
Community support made the dream of the Youth Center a reality, and supporters are making the backyard possible. Bright Futures for Youth invests in positive experiences, positive relationships, and positive environments that help youth thrive.
What I like about the Friendship Club is they take us on trips and they connect us with new people, and they're very loving people. It's a very good club for girls to get to know other people and gets them out of their comfort zone and everything.
In Nevada County, 49% of youth are on Medi-Cal, 1 in 7 face food insecurity, and 1 in 20 are homeless. Bright Futures for Youth helps meet basic needs and ensures access to services. It's hard to focus on homework when you're hungry, concerned about housing, or dealing with mental wellness. We offer free food to all youth in our programs and served more than 13,000 healthy meals in 2024.
So here in the kitchen at Bright Futures for Youth, we are serving hundreds of after-school meals per week. We're making everything from scratch and using as much fresh ingredients from the local farmers and even organic as much as possible.
I just take them. I like the pizza and I like sushi, and I like how the meals are healthy but they're still good.
We provide clothes and ensure access to healthcare and counseling. and help with applications for college and financial aid. Our staff helps young people experiencing housing instability navigate through an often confusing and overwhelming process to get housing and apply for housing assistance. The SAFE program has helped more than 220 young people, including many pregnant or new mothers, during the past few years.
Yeah, like that.
Bright Futures for Youth has always relied heavily on individual and small business supporters for our funding. Community-based supporters are the largest source of funding and serve as our foundation. About 80% of our annual budget comes from donations from individuals and small businesses in the community. Grants account for the remaining 20%. After 3 decades, Bright Futures continues to embrace new ways to connect with and help young people build a foundation for success. Please join us in this important work. The impact of collective giving is inspirational. We need your support to continue to help the youth thrive.
Hi, AAUW, Happy New Year. My name is Mayra Puente. I use ASU pronouns, and I am an assistant professor of higher education at the University of California, Santa Barbara, which sits on the unceded lands and waters of the Chumash people. This year, I am also a postdoctoral fellow and have been immersed in a mixed methods research project on college access and choice for rural Latinx students from migrant farm working backgrounds living and learning in California's Central Coast region. During this past fall 2024 quarter, I have been visiting a high school site located in a small agricultural town in the Central Coast and observing the college application processes of rural Latinx high school seniors. Because of the critical race Bandera methodology that I employ in my research, which is a way of conducting research that is rooted in critical race and Chicana Latina feminist perspectives, I have taken on a more active membership role in my observations, in which I prioritize students' educational and emotional needs during the college application process and during my observations. So my role as a researcher is secondary to this. So for example, I have assisted students in choosing which colleges to apply to, researching these institutions with them, locating them on a map, seeing how far they are from their communities and their families, which is important for many students in this study. I have looked up majors with these students, trying to see what these institutions offer and how they align with students' career paths. I have also read students' college and scholarship essays and provided them with feedback. And of course, I have shared my own experiences as a first-generation rural Latina college student to assist them in making informed decisions about which institutions, majors, and career paths are best suited for them. So in this way, by employing this critical race Bandera methodology in this research study on college access and choice, I interrupt the lack of college resources, information, and guidance that tend not to be available or located in high schools and communities like the one that I center in my research project. That is, communities that are low income, dependent on manual labor, such as farm labor, and geographically isolated. For my observations thus far, I have noticed 2 types of students and college application experiences. One consists of the students who are more interested in attending a college locally, which for them might mean applying to and enrolling in a local community college. There are 3 that are nearby to these students, but even in talking and observing in the community colleges that the students apply to, there are some that are more geographically distant distant than others, and so transportation poses an issue to these students. Some are also considering attending the local CSU. And still, even though some of these students might be interested in attending a community college or a local CSU, a regional CSU, a lot of these students come to the college advising sessions that are offered by the college and career counselor at the high school site, who I've been collaborating with and who is the primary person who has invited me to conduct this study and to conduct these observations. And they come to these sessions asking about the next steps, right? About transferring, some students asking questions about grad school and law school, despite only being 17, 18 years old and very early on in their educational journeys, which to me demonstrates their commitment that they have to their education and earning a bachelor's degree and even an advanced degree in the long run, despite wanting to start at the community college. And this finding is imperative because much of the higher education research and literature that employ Eurocentric perspectives or more traditional perspectives often blame students, particularly those from low-income backgrounds and students of color, like the ones in my study, for choosing to attend a community college instead of a four-year, because 4 years, right, are set to provide more opportunities and resources. However, the students in my study are showing that they are committed to earning a bachelor's degree, just that they're not ready at this moment, right, to make that leap from high school to a four-year university. And for me, this is reframing, right, what it means to undergo the college application process and what it means to be a quote unquote successful student. The students that are wanting to start at the community college are successful, are committed to their education, are determined in their own right. And this is also very much reflective of the theoretical perspective that I employ in my study, which is college conocimiento, which acknowledges that institutional barriers exist that limit access and opportunity for racialized and low-income students, as well as rural students, is what I argue in my study. Yet, despite these limitations, structurally, students still have choices and they make decisions about their higher education pathways and career pathways in ways that are aligned with their current realities. There is another group of students that I've been noticing in my study as I've been conducting these observations who are applying to many and multiple institutions, including institutions that are further away, such as in other states or on the East Coast, for example. And what I've been noticing thus far is that there are some students that are motivated to leave their small town community for several reasons. At times, the out-of-state college recruiters that come to visit these students themselves instill the idea in the students that leaving is better. And as a member of a rural community myself, what I've been observing is that there is this deficit connotation when the recruiters pitch this idea that leaving it is better, because it suggests that rural communities don't have much to offer us, and that we can't be afforded a quality life in these small town communities. And so there are some students, right, that do want to experience a bigger city, more progressive politics, a different scenery than the rural small towns have to offer. And there are other students that are applying to these out-of-state, faraway institutions because of the recruiting practices, right? Constantly receiving emails from these institutions, such as in the Midwest, that are currently lacking enrollment, especially diverse enrollment, and are being offered free fee waivers to apply to these colleges, and are also learning about financial aid that does exist at these institutions that they are sort of promised to receive once they are enrolled. And so because the students in my study, right, are coming from these low income backgrounds, money and financial aid are significant drivers of their college applications. However, I'll gain a deeper understanding of the reasons why students chose certain institutions to apply to and their overall experience with the college application process as first generation rural Latinx migrant farm working students. this semester now in the spring 2025 semester, as I'll be moving toward the next few phases of my mixed methods research study, in which I'll be recruiting students that I've been observing to engage in pláticas with me, which is a Chicana Latina feminist qualitative research methodology that can loosely be translated into conversations. And conducting pláticas is a more culturally relevant tool to employ when conducting research with Latinx communities. And I'll engage these students in conversations about their college application experiences, what served them, what was useful, what could be improved, and encourage them to think about their rural communities from an asset-based approach in which they will be prompted to discuss how their communities have facilitated their college application processes and higher education pursuits. I look forward to sharing another update on this study, and thank you to AAUW and the donors for supporting this research.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for hearing about my work today. My name is Amira Noeuv. I am a PhD candidate at UC San Diego in the Ethnic Studies Department, and my project is on Cambodian American transgenerational trauma healing. So my work is very much rooted in the ethnic studies practice of research justice, so centering Cambodian Americans' agency, knowledge, and priorities to challenge the ways in which knowledge is produced and extracted from my community alongside other marginalized groups. Specifically, my work is an engagement between health, refugee studies, and Cambodian American experiences with the objective to expand the scope of how ethnic studies and Asian American studies can better incorporate decolonial practices at this juncture of global and public mental health and Southeast Asian American refugee studies. So my approach to this very large research endeavor is examining two questions. One, how do second generation Cambodian Americans embody the essence of Jia in the ways that they navigate transgenerational trauma? And then the second question is, how do these inherited practices of Jia highlight their agencies in restoring Cambodian American refugee experiences and aspirations? So I framed this idea of Cambodian American healing through the concept of Jia. And Jia is the Khmer term for heal or healing or to be well. And Jia encompasses physical, mental, spiritual, and relationships to both living and non-living beings. So healing is not only embodied and an individual practice, but it is simultaneously also collective and it's relational. Gia also recognizes that healing is a process that is complex, layered, fluid, and nonlinear. So when the term Gia is used on its own, it signifies something that is being treated or something that is being close to being completely healed, but it doesn't necessarily imply closure. So while both Cambodian and Western wellness approaches recognize closure as a significant step towards trauma healing, Cambodian culture also accepts that suffering is inherited to the human experiences. And it acknowledges that the magnitude of Cambodian American historical and transgenerational trauma that stems from genocide, war, imperialism, forced displacement, racial violence, etc., might not take just this lifetime to heal from. And so the emphasis then isn't to be 100% healed from trauma, but to instead rely on these techniques to help transcend suffering from the trauma. And it also acknowledges that vulnerability of the healing process, pain can and is often part of healing. And so how calamity is addressed can be sufficient even when we cannot completely heal our wounds. So I look at this to disrupt the historical and contemporary narratives about Cambodian American refugee families and mental health. When I started this research, I found that healthcare practices and predominant social science literatures about Cambodian Americans' experiences usually fixate on four broad topics. That is the socioeconomic immobility, low education attainment and barriers. When focusing on trauma, it's usually centered on Cambodian genocide survivors' mental health, and there's very little scholarship on second generation Cambodian American mental health. And then the fourth topic is this parent-child fraught relationship that predominantly centers cultural dissonance. So this increasingly being premised on a very simplified idea of inherited trauma, and this problematic notion of parents passing down their trauma to their children through genetics, in addition to the parents' inability to cope with trauma, leads to these negative consequences for their children. And so, as an ethnic studies scholar, I recognize that these works and practices center a deficit ideology. It assumes that these socioeconomic disparities, like poverty level, low education, incarceration, etc., are the person's or the community's deficiency. And it's very much damage-centered research and practices that also functions to then deflect attention away from the systems and structures that disenfranchise Cambodian American communities while positioning them as the problem. And so this greatly marks how the second generation Cambodian American contend with their experiences. And so my research departs from these approaches and narratives to critically view what I call Cambodian American refugee futurity as something that unfolds from refugees' everyday acts of resistance. So I shift away from the cause and consequences of individual and collective transgenerational trauma to instead think about what happens after we've been wounded. I also go beyond a clinical prescription of trauma and of healing to engage the socio-political. I point out that trauma didn't end upon Cambodians' resettlement in the US, that it's ongoing with various systems of oppression. Again, for example, racial violence. But as that is ongoing, so too is healing. And so I pivot from a trauma-informed care to thinking about GIA-focused care as a way to minimize this tendency to pathologize unwellness. And then again, moving from this deficit damage-centered practice and narrative towards one that focuses on Cambodian American desires, hope, joy, and resistance. And so my dissertation is how we GR scabbing wounds. And I use this metaphor of scab and scabbing to talk about how while survivors, Cambodian genocide survivors like my parents endure the injuries of war and displacement, I'm looking at how the second generation experiences the scabs of these wounds and how trauma healing is an embodiment of inherited GIA practices. And so I use the nonlinear stages of scabbing to convey my argument that GIA needs to happen alongside community. It entails kinship rebuilding. It allows us to engage in healing through social justice activism. And then finally, it's regenerating through various cultural productions to make room for new skin to grow in place of damaged tissue. And so this metaphor of scab and scabbing really captures the second gen's desire to both remember the painful histories, but to also move towards an empowering and productive reimagination of our identities and our futures. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anaïs Voski, pronounced like that because I'm Turkish Hungarian. I'm a PhD candidate at Stanford University in the MEd Interdisciplinary Program in Environment and Resources with a minor in psychology. First, I would like to take this brief opportunity to express my immense gratitude for the fellowship and the support provided by AAUW. So thank you so much. Now, moving on to my research. As you probably noticed from my program, my research is fundamentally interdisciplinary, but encompasses the field of environmental psychology. This new field and my work are seeking to understand the human psychological causes and consequences of the global environmental crisis. I use the term global environmental crisis because as a formerly trained environmental scientist, I'm all too familiar with the biodiversity crisis and a range of other ecological issues that are compounded by the climate crisis. So the underlying recognition is that since humanity is causing the crisis, only we can be the solution. So when I talk about human causes, I'm talking about what drives human behavior, such as emotions and values. It's necessary to understand these drivers to increase mitigation behaviors. So for example, electric vehicle incentives from governments or reducing personal meat consumption for a more sustainable diet. On the other hand, psychological consequences are about understanding how this rapidly changing environment affects us, both in the present and the future. For example, with more frequent and intense heat waves, we are already seeing more violent crime and mental health hospitalizations. But there's also a tremendous sense of loss, both of species and ways of life, including and especially for Indigenous cultures. Since this is a relatively new scientific field, significant gaps remain in the literature, which include but are not limited to, first of all, the lack of data on non-Western or global South populations, as well as underprivileged populations just more generally. There's also lack of high-quality research on the emotional causes and consequences of the crisis, despite emotions being one of the fundamental evolutionary mechanisms predictively driving human behavior. There's also not enough data about the potential different impacts of these intersecting dimensions based on gender and other demographic factors. Therefore, my doctoral research will contribute to filling these gaps by exploring and causally mapping the linkages between specific emotions and behavior change, focusing on both mitigation and adaptation outcomes, with emphasis on the global South, gender, and climate justice. As an interdisciplinary scholar, I'm very much being trained in the tradition that there's no one way of knowing. Therefore, my research combines qualitative and quantitative research methods to gain a fuller and more holistic understanding of these phenomena. This includes in-depth interviews for exploratory studies that help build theory from the bottom up for real-world representativeness. Then comes the top-down quantitative approach, which includes surveys with populations from across the globe, as well as large-scale experiments with hundreds or sometimes thousands of participants to understand cause and effect. Although I have numerous ongoing projects, I'm going to focus on 3 of my 6 dissertation chapters that exemplify my research aims and approach to methods. So chapter 1 has already been published in Global Environmental Psychology, which journal I specifically chose because they endorse foreign language abstracts, which in this case is Turkish, and give badge recognitions for diverse and inclusive science. By the way, you can read the article free of charge by scanning the QR code. So this chapter mapped a wide range of emotional responses to the crisis from the bottom up, as opposed to just focusing on the 1 to 2 emotions that are most often measured in Western contexts, especially climate anxiety. So leveraging my privilege as a Stanford student, I specifically chose to conduct data collection in my home country of Turkey as a way to uplift those voices that are often underrepresented in the psychological literature. And I just wanted to make note that I'm extremely proud of that. So this bottom-up approach allowed us to identify that climate anger and ecological grief was much more prevalent than climate anxiety in our sample. And together with other emerging evidence from the global South, this opened up Pandora's box. Is climate anxiety, the one observed in many Western countries, due specifically to measuring for climate anxiety? Because most measurement tools were adapted from the clinical literature and not from the emotion science literature that contains the much wider range of emotions. Or, since anxiety is by definition a future-oriented emotion, maybe non-Western populations are having different emotional responses because they're already disproportionately experiencing the crisis in the present. So then, Chapter 2 tested the effects of a real-life intervention. We partnered with a new program at Stanford that allows students to work with local community organizations on advancing climate justice in underprivileged neighborhoods here in the Bay Area. We found that students' engagement work not only significantly increased their climate anger, but also their motivation and enthusiasm for climate-related work. Anger and enthusiasm are both mobilizing emotions, and these are extremely important for combating immobilizing emotions that are common among youth, such as powerlessness and hopelessness. Therefore, it's no surprise that we also found a significant increase in students' pro-environmental behaviors, such as reducing personal consumption and getting more involved in climate politics. This was a new program, so the model will be shared with other higher educational institutions at the Campus Compact Conference in 2025, and we've already had numerous inquiries from other universities. The main point here is that this local approach allowed us to test some of the hypotheses that we generated from the bottom up in Chapter 1 in a smaller scale setting in preparation for a bigger cross-cultural survey. Which brings me to Chapter 4. So this global survey is in progress, but it will look for associations between emotional and behavioral responses to the crisis, with an emphasis on underrepresented populations in the Global South, which are highlighted with red on the map. So among others, we will also look at gender and climate injustice as potential moderators. Given all the groundwork that has gone into this, we predict these populations will be experiencing more negative and mobilizing emotions than their Western counterparts, which requires categorically different responses and interventions from governments and decision makers. So for example, it would mean we need to target somewhat different emotional mechanisms to increase pro-environmental behaviors in these contexts. But more importantly, it would also mean these populations may require different kinds of support and interventions to better cope with the crisis psychologically. So as I mentioned, this work is in progress, but I'm super excited about this chapter, as you can tell by my stumbling at the end. If you're interested in learning more about my research, please feel free to reach out via email or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat about my work, and just thank you so much for your attention.
Hi everyone, my name is Christine Vega, and I am an assistant professor of Chicano Studies at San Jose State University. To all my relations, to the caretakers of this land that I currently reside in, Mobek Ma'aloni, in the San Jose Bay Area, California. I want to thank the AAUW for the support in funding my short-term publication fellowship. And I also want to note that I translanguage between English and Spanish in some parts of this presentation. I'd like to start with the artwork of this slide, this image, Chicana Power, illustrated by Melanie Cervantes, for a book talk at UC Berkeley on November of 2019, titled Motherwork y Movidas, Chicanas on the Front Lines. And at this event, Chicana Motherwork, a collective of 5 mother scholars I co-founded, shared our journeys as mother scholar activistas about our anthology as a response to the erasure of mothers in the academy. Little did we know, months after COVID-19 would impact the world, and there was no way parenting, caretaking, and mothering could be ignored. This image was one of powerful imagery portraying Chicanas and their children resisting the erasure of the academy. My work centers and examines the journey of first-generation Chicanx mothers in the U.S. Southwest flagship universities. On a national scale, Chicanx Latinx women with children are less likely to complete post-secondary degrees. As faculty with children under the 5 years of age are less likely to receive tenure. The PhD attainment rate for Chicanx Latinx women remains the lowest amongst racial and ethnic counterparts. And Chicana and Latina women represent less than 1 out of every 100 PhD recipients. Such outcomes uphold the ivory tower's historic social, political, and economic structures that reward childless, white, heterosexual males. Parenting status transgresses the mother's role between boundaries, where the public and private sphere become blurred. Instead, a mothering identity disrupts normative and dichotomous ideals, values, and presumptions of what is expected through the everyday acts of resistance, refusal, and care work. Therefore, the following are my leading questions. What educational experiences and factors impact first-generation Chicanx, Latinx mother scholars and their educational pursuits towards a higher education? And how do the intersecting identities of race, class, gender, sexuality, motherhood impact mother scholars? And how does motherhood inform, impact the intellectual, spiritual, and physical body, mind, spirit experiences? And just to again reiterate like why this work matters, 62% of junior women in social sciences do not have children compared to male counterparts. 38% of all women will leave their doctoral studies or their field of study to have a family. And women who have children within 5 years of completing the dissertation are 20 to 25 less likely to receive tenure. And to kind of give some context around language, I think it's really important to talk about mother tongue and some of the terms. And for the sake of today's presentation, I'm only going to briefly give some definitions to 3 of them. And so drawing from Patricia Collins's other mother work, Michelle Tellez first offered the term Chicana mother work in 2011 as she addresses the tensions and negotiations Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx parents and their children experience in raising families. For Tellez, mother work is rooted in familia, community, and culture. In addition, Chicana mother work is a framework and a call to collective action to bridge the existing gaps of the Chicana, Chicano educational pipeline and beyond. Cheryl Matias introduced the term mother scholar at the American Educational Research Association, or ARA, in 2011, coalescing the identity of mothers, scholars, and activists, applying a hyphen in between mother and scholar. And myself, I use the term mother scholar throughout my work, moving the hyphen to highlight the impact of combined identity of mother and scholar in unison. Some of my contributions to the field are theoretical frameworks that actually inform my dissertation work and as continues to inform my work now as a professor and writing and publishing around mother work is the critical maternalista framework. These theories braid into my work and I'm building off and name again critical maternalista framework as a contribution and I'm publishing through the AAUW funding through the Chicana Latina Journal of MALCS, Mujeres Activas en Letras para Cambio Social. And I would like to share these 5 tenets really that centralize that mother identity or mother scholar identity is a social construction. These 5 tenets centralize race, ethnicity, gender, and motherhood and sexuality. It illuminates the lived experiences of first generation mother scholars. It debunks deficit stereotypes of pregnant presenting and of parenting mother scholars, highlights the missing data in the educational pipeline, and elevate the often erased narratives of mother scholars que sobresalen, who thrive. And so through the ethnographic research approach of my work, although some of these, experiences have been really difficult in terms of like their as parenting people in doctoral study programs, I think what's really important is the theoretical framework of critical race theory, critical feminist theory, and critical maternal theory help us braid a framework that allows us to debunk the negative impacts we experience in the institution. And I draw from these, methodologies and theories to help me coalesce and view the research with different lenses. Some of the findings that I did want to share, what really important in my research has been that mother scholars are more likely to be discriminated against because of their race, class, gender, and parenting or pregnant presenting status. They're shamed and threatened to lose their funding and their credibility as scholars in their programs, and are more likely to leave or be pushed out of their PhD programs or schooling in general because of prejudice of parenting status, lack of support, and lack of resources on campus. I also want to remind us through the work of Cindy Cruz and Epistemologies of a Brown Body, our production of knowledge begins in the bodies of our mothers and grandmothers and the acknowledgement of the critical practices of women of color before us. The most profound liberating politics come from the interrogations of our own social locations and narratives that works outward from our specific corporalities. And so based on some of the findings, what became a beacon of hope and resistance was at least one person a student organization, collective, or femtor, mentor was the parenting student was a lifeline to continue their doctoral studies and graduate. Additionally, it was their children who also kept them motivated to continue alongside the support of other mothers and other scholars who provided encouragement to continue. In moving my work towards a book proposal, I'm growing the area of queering motherhood and parenting identities. Although briefly mentioned in the dissertation, it was understudied and remained an essential topic for analysis. Mothers and parents identified within the spectrum of queerness resisting, refusing, and challenging the term mother. Building from Black and Chicana lesbian and queer scholars Audre Lorde, Cherry Moraga, and Ana Castillo, I'm centering Chicana and Black feminist lenses on parenting identities of this book proposal based on the unused data and analysis, returning to the field to collect more supplemental interviews. With that, I thank you so much for your time, and I hope that this work continues to inspire and transform our research.
Hi everyone, my name is Ameera Waterford and I'm a master's student at Stanford University studying management science and engineering on the technology and engineering management track. Thank you so much to the AAUW Selected Professions Fellowship and all of their funders for giving me this opportunity to pursue education beyond my bachelor's degree, which was also earned at Stanford University in product design engineering. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm really excited to talk more about my program, how I'm applying it, and the other activities I've been involved in during this master's program. So as I mentioned previously, my program is called Management Science and Engineering, which has been abbreviated to MSNE. And to answer the question you probably have, which is what is MSNE? MSNE creates solutions to pressing societal problems by integrating and pushing the frontiers of operations research, economics, and organization science. In particular, I've been immersed in the world of operations research, which is learning how to apply analytical methods to improve decision-making, productivity, and also business outcomes. This is a really good sort of marriage with my background in engineering, but also my interest in business. With this background in product design, I've been trying to figure out what does it take to build a company or build a business around a product, and that's something that I've been diving deeply into here at Stanford. Some select areas of coursework here, first the being quantitative analysis. This is a very quantitatively rigorous degree. I've taken courses as shown here in applied statistics, optimization, probabilistic analysis, and understanding how this logic or these techniques and tools can be applied in business contexts. I've also been gathering domain knowledge, for me in particular, around medical devices, healthcare innovation, technology-based companies, and a little bit about patent law to understand how inventors and entrepreneurs can protect their ideas. Lastly, I've been highly immersed in the entrepreneurship ecosystem here at Stanford, taking courses such as the Lean Launchpad, one of Stanford's most eminent courses on entrepreneurship, as well as taking more qualitative, insightful classes such as Secret Foundations of Scalable Startups, Transforming Education Through Entrepreneurship, where I've learned insights, frameworks, and been connected with potential mentors in order to better understand what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And more practically, I've been applying many, if not all, of the learnings from my master's degree program into my company, which is called CutBoss. So a little bit of background on CutBoss. This project was started during my senior year of college as part of my product design capstone course, and the goal of myself and my team was to make the menstrual cup experience easier for beginner or new users. A menstrual cup is an alternative to a pad or a tampon used during a woman's menstrual cycle to catch her menstrual flow and make her just as able to go about her day-to-day business as she would be if she wasn't on her period or on her cycle. Our slogan for CutBoss is Boss for Your Flow because we're really focused on making this accessible and easy and empowering for women who want to switch to a more sustainable menstrual product. So, and during my master's program in management science and engineering, I've been able to take a number of courses. I'll double click on a few of them here. in order to understand how I can structure and grow and build this business to make it effective for long-term scaled success. The first that I'll just briefly go over is Lean Launchpad. That class was really essential for me to learn how to do a lot with a little. It's all about using lean startup principles to build and grow a company before you have like a lot of money or a lot of resources at your disposal. I also learned a lot about customer interviewing, iterating on our minimum viable product or MVP, and also practicing how to pitch to potential investors. At the time, I was working on a black hair care startup called Sisterhood Hair Care, but the learnings have been completely transferable to Cut Boss. Secondly, I've taken a course on patent law that was targeted at engineers and entrepreneurs rather than lawyers. But it was very legal heavy, and I learned a lot about the US patent ecosystem and what it takes to protect your intellectual property. The outcome of this class was a completely drafted provisional application that I'll be submitting in the coming weeks to sort of take that first step towards protecting Cut Boss's intellectual property. Another class that, for obvious reasons, has been very helpful is Technology Assessment and Regulation of Medical Devices. In this class, I learned a lot about what it takes to pursue and achieve FDA approval or clearance. From the very complex medical devices, I wrote a paper on robotic endoscopy systems, to very simple products that don't even need FDA approval. Cut Boss falls somewhere in between here, and eventually I'll be hiring an FDA consultant to work on the application alongside the founding team. But for now, this was a really helpful sort of first look and initial sort of way to dip my toes into FDA regulation as it relates to medical products, such as a new menstrual cup. Lastly, I'd like to mention one of the insights that I learned in the class Secrets of Scalable Startups. In that class, we had experienced founders coming in week after week, giving us advice and insights and connecting the real world with the concepts we learned in class. And the thing that stuck with me the most was this idea that the best startups are both non-consensus and right. This means that maybe not every single person thinks that this is the killer idea, but what matters is that you think it's a killer idea and that you're right about that. So whenever I am working on Cut Boss, I'm constantly drawing on the learnings from my classes and mentors and advisors within the MS&E department. And I'm very grateful for the impact that this master's degree has had on the progress I've made on Cut Boss. Lastly, I'd like to highlight my selection for and involvement in the Stanford Technology Venture Program's 2025 Threshold Venture Fellowship. For this fellowship, 13 master's students from Stanford's various schools, business school, School of Engineering, were selected to participate in this fellowship program that gives us a front row seat to the world of venture creation. Myself and the other fellows meet weekly for classroom sessions, workshops, guest speakers, and in-depth discussions among ourselves to discuss what it takes to launch and lead high-growth, high-impact organizations. This is an aspiration that many of us, if actually all of us, have, despite coming from different educational, professional, and academic backgrounds. But that sort of diversity of thought really enriches the experience in the cohort, and we're also led by two incredible women in venture capital who have led amazing careers and are now dedicating more of their time to supporting this sort of next generation of leaders. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening and learning more about my experience as a master's student in management science and engineering at Stanford University. And thank you again so much for your financial contribution to my education. It is truly invaluable and makes this experience possible for me. Thank you so much. Have a great day.